conducted himself leading up to the match, and how he was involved so heavily with this protest against wrestling in the United States and this whole Canada versus America type angle that WWE were going flat out with for the better part of 1997 to 1998. I think that, definitely this DVD is going to be a must-have for any fan of Bret Hart versus Shawn Michaels matches. On the previous installment of the program documenting the release of this DVD, some of the things I mentioned were some of the great matches that I had the privilege of seeing between Bret Hart and Shawn Michaels long before this Montreal Screwjob ever happened. It was years back in 1992, 1993. Matches that were actually commentated by Lord Alfred Hayes. That's how old these matches were. Some of the matches I can remember seeing from the 90s were a cage match between Bret Hart and Shawn Michaels, and a ladder match for the Intercontinental Championship that actually saw Bret Hart as the defending champion and go on to retain the title. That was around the time that Shawn Michaels was a heel and a young contender for the Intercontinental Championship and being booked to lose against Bret Hart. It wasn't until the mid-90s, around 1995, 1996, that the company began booking Shawn Michaels to win against someone like Bret Hart. I mean, Shawn Michaels beating Bret Hart in 1992 would have been unheard of. But I think that Shawn Michaels definitely made a transition from being someone that you couldn't stand into somebody that you just absolutely loved, no matter if he was a heel or a babyface, ever since 1997, 1998. Which will be remembered for the birth of D-Generation X, and of course everyone remembers the role that D-Generation X played in the 1997 Montreal Screwjob. The original finish of the match, it was written to be Shawn Michaels applying the sharpshooter to Bret Hart. Bret Hart was supposed to have reversed the sharpshooter, and DX and the Hart Foundation were supposed to ambush the ring. Going back to my original point of how the pay-per-view was called Gang Wars, and that would have tied in well with the theme. Bret Hart was supposed to retain the title via disqualification and walk out of Montreal and the company several days later as the WWE Champion, again similar to how Edge left the company at WM27, winning against Del Rio and retaining the world title, forfeiting it a few days after. If you were going to have Bret Hart leave the company, and you knew you were having Bret Hart leave the company a few days after Survivor Series, and that was supposed to have been his final pay-per-view, you did the right thing by having Shawn Michaels win the title, because nowadays that would be what would happen if a person was leaving the company, unless something special was behind the reason of them retaining or winning the title in their final match, like Trish Stratus and Edge did. Originally what you would do, you would have your champion drop the title to his challenger at his final pay-per-view. That's what they should have done with Bret Hart, and that's what they did. I think that, honestly, Bret Hart got what he deserved, because leading up to this match, the unprofessionality on both parts was unacceptable. The unprofessionality between Shawn Michaels and Bret Hart when they were doing this whole Canada versus America thing was unexplainable and very unacceptable. I think that one thing that the documentary is going to take a look at is how this feud really turned Shawn Michaels and Bret Hart into the individuals that they are today. And you cannot say that they patched everything up, because I'll tell you, how can you forget everything that happened in 1997? I mean, the WWE screwed Bret Hart out of his career. I mean, sitting across from Shawn Michaels doing that interview, I can't imagine how much of an uncomfortable feeling Bret Hart had when he was talking about the Montreal Screwjob. And in the trailer that we're going to be playing for you here to give you a preview of the Greatest Rivalries DVD, you're going to hear Bret Hart become somewhat emotional in the opening part of the trailer that runs for about 2.5 minutes. We have a copy of the trailer. We're going to be playing it here for you for part 2 of our coverage in the release of the Greatest Rivalries DVD, to give you somewhat of an idea of what this DVD is going to be about. Originally, I had stated here over the air that the Greatest Rivalries DVD was going to feature a comprehensive look at the Bret Hart-Shawn Michaels rivalry from the 90s, and it was also going to include several other feuds. The only feud that it's going to document is Bret Hart versus Shawn Michaels, some of the matches that they have had that have never been released before on DVD, that were released on Coliseum Home Video VHS tapes. And it's going to include an in-depth interview with Bret Hart and Shawn Michaels conducted by Jim Ross, and some interviews with superstars that were there for the Montreal Screwjob, including Earl Hebner and a number of other WWE employees, and the members of DX are also going to weigh in on it. Originally, I think that's why all the legends were signed to WWE Legends contracts, like Nash, Shawn, Waltman, who were very influential members of the Clique, along with Shawn Michaels and Triple H back in the 90s. I think that's why they signed all these legends to contracts, to put together documentaries like this that may have never been put together if these legends weren't under contract. So that was a pretty brilliant move on the part of Vince McMahon and the company, to sign all these legends to Legends deals, have them involved in storylines on television on an on-again, off-again basis, and have them make DVDs for WWE home videos. That's great. I'm going to be really looking forward to seeing how this DVD is, formatted, how it's going to, be received by the WWE fans. It's obviously going to receive a lot of criticism. It's obviously going to receive a lot of reviews on the internet. I know a lot of columnists and journalists have written about it for their written columns. I myself put together a written column for In This Corner with Jonathan Clarke, which I will detail for you here in just a few minutes. Some of the points that I mentioned in the column can be found in the columns forum on our website. I'll give you the information for that. It's a comprehensive look at the DVD and some of the details that it's going to be detailing when it is circulated amongst wrestling fans over the next number of months. I think it's definitely one of the more controversial DVD releases since the release of the top 50 superstars in WWE history, which was called one of the most controversial countdowns to ever be released on WWE DVD. I think it's one of the most controversial DVDs since the release of that, and rightfully so, given the contents of it. I mean, Bret Hart and Shawn Michaels definitely meant so much to this business, and I've said time and time again that Bret Hart and Shawn Michaels definitely, gave us some of the best matches when they were at the peak of their career and on a rise to stardom. I mean, they won the WWE title 10 times, respectively, between the two of them. Referee Earl Hebner, who I've had the privilege of interviewing here on HW Entertainment Variety Radio, told me that he did what he did. He was put in a compromising position, and he did what he did to keep his job and his reputation with the company. And he said to me, "You would have done the same thing." Jim the Humble Neidhart, who I had the privilege of interviewing several months back, told me the same thing, putting it to me similar to the way that Earl Hebner had originally put it to me. And no doubt I probably would have done it if I was the official for that match, because you're in a compromising position. There are people with higher authority in the company, including John Laurinaitis, Vince McMahon, and the members of the executive board. So obviously you're going to do what you have to do to maintain your reputation, and that's what Earl Hebner and people like Jim the Humble Neidhart, who were a part of both the original and the reincarnation version of the Hart Foundation, did. They did what they had to do to maintain their reputation, and I mean, they had phenomenal reputations leading up to this, this Montreal Screwjob, as the WWE likes to refer to it as. I mean, Earl Hebner has refereed some of the greatest matches to ever happen in WWE, including the Iron Man match between Shawn Michaels and Bret Hart, which was one of the original matches between the two of them that took place in Anaheim, California. Bret Hart has become emotionally shaken up after every match that Shawn Michaels and him have had, especially the ones where he was booked to lose and drop major championships to him in. Everybody thought that Bret Hart was going to get the better of Shawn Michaels in this anticipated rematch, the first match between the two of them since 1996. But there were different news reports leading up to the Survivor Series detailing that Bret Hart had plans of leaving the WWE. A lot of Canadian news programs had documented Bret Hart going to leave the WWE for WCW. So, I mean, WWE really took the initiative of sending Bret Hart a message. They made an example of him in his home country, which is something that a lot of fans probably didn't agree with, especially the Canadian fans. I don't know how the American fans feel about it, but I'm a Canadian wrestling fan who loves Shawn Michaels more than a Bret Hart. So I think that, WWE did what they had to do, and that's something that I hope they illustrate and get across with the release of this DVD. One thing that I'm going to be interested in seeing in this DVD is the reactions of both Bret Hart and Shawn Michaels. I can't imagine how uncomfortable Bret Hart must have felt when he was conducting that interview across from Shawn Michaels. I mean, there has to be a great deal of animosity still between the two of them, no matter how many times they staged themselves making it up and patching up their differences on a 2010 edition of Raw that does the feud no justice. I mean, what we really should have had if Bret Hart didn't have his concussion and inability to compete inside of the ring was a match to settle their differences. That would have really put a stamp of finality on the Bret Hart-Shawn Michaels saga that developed ever since 1992 1993, going back to the cage and ladder matches that they had. But due to Bret Hart's health status and the inability of Shawn Michaels to perform to the best of his ability like he could in the 1990s, 1995 to 1996, when Michaels was in the prime of his career, having some of his best matches for the Intercontinental Championship, which he was able to successfully retain against the likes of Razor Ramon, Dean Douglas, and who's the other guy I'm thinking of, Jeff Jarrett. I think that, this DVD needed to be released, definitely, to give the fans who weren't there for a part of the Montreal Screwjob an idea of what really happened, because WWE were talking about it a lot during the Vince McMahon-Bret Hart match and program leading up to WrestleMania 26, which culminated with a Hart family lumberjack match at WrestleMania 26, which didn't need to happen. It really didn't need to happen. The other members of the Hart family didn't need to be involved and give Bret Hart a decisive advantage in the match, but given his health status, I guess they needed to do something and put together something quick, knowing that Bret Hart was going to jeopardize his health getting into the ring for the first time in 12 years. His last actual wrestling match took place in WCW with Bill Goldberg. That ended with Goldberg actually kicking him in the side of the head and giving him a concussion, which has inhabilitated Bret Hart and enabled him from competing inside of the ring. And if it weren't for Goldberg kicking him in the head, I think we would have seen this rematch done between Bret Hart and Shawn Michaels. It's an ultimate dream match, kind of like how John Cena versus The Rock at WM28 is a dream match. But it's a dream match that's never going to happen, so I guess this DVD is WWE's way of really making up for it all. There were so many people involved with the Montreal Screwjob, and there are different opinions by both individual as to what really happened. The Big Show was the one that said the bottom line was Bret Hart was the guy who was leaving the company, and the company did what it had to do to protect its reputation, and it